Most people grabbing a hot sauce bottle off the shelf have no idea what's actually creating the heat inside it. We investigated 7 of the biggest hot sauce brands in America, and what we found changes how you read every label in that aisle. Some of the worst results came from the bottles with the most loyal fan bases, the ones people defend like a sports team, the ones sitting on restaurant tables across the country right now. And one brand tested positive for a synthetic dye the European Union has moved to restrict. Let's get into it. Why the hot sauce? Aisle is lying to you. Hot sauce has a simple premise. Take peppers, add vinegar, add salt, ferment, or cook them down, and bottle the result. That's it. That's the whole product. Peppers, acid, salt. In that formulation, the heat comes from capsaicin, a compound produced naturally inside the pepper itself. The flavor comes from the variety of pepper used, how it was grown, how it was processed, and how long it was fermented. The ingredient list on a genuinely made hot sauce should be short enough to read in about 4 seconds. Now, go pick up the bottle you have in your fridge right now and read the back panel. If you're looking at xanthan gum, sodium benzoate, artificial color, modified starch, or something listed only as natural flavor, somebody already decided that what came out of the pepper wasn't enough, and rather than source better peppers, they filled the gap with chemistry. The hot sauce category is uniquely vulnerable to this because the product is used in small quantities. A teaspoon on your eggs, a few shakes on your tacos. Nobody sits down and drinks a glass of hot sauce, which means the cumulative load from each individual serving looks manageable in isolation. But a bottle lasts weeks. The additives accumulate the same way the flavor does, quietly in the background every single time you reach for it. 7 brands didn't hold up. 3 did. Here's the full breakdown. Number 7. Louisiana brand original hot sauce. This is the one that's been on Southern tables since 1920. The simple red label, the plain bottle, the price that never seems to change no matter what inflation does to everything around it. Louisiana brand is what people reach for when they want something unpretentious. No story on the label, no heritage narrative, just sauce. That simplicity is part of what makes it easy to trust without looking further. Here's what you find when you do look further. Louisiana brand original contains 720 milligrams of sodium per teaspoon. Let that land for a second. 1 teaspoon. Most people shake considerably more than that onto a plate of food. A generous pour over your scrambled eggs in the morning, and you're already approaching a third of the recommended daily sodium limit before you've touched anything else on the table. For anyone managing blood pressure, that math gets serious quickly. For someone already on a diuretic or an ACE inhibitor, that single morning shake is not a minor addition. It's a compounding problem. The pepper base is aged cayenne, which sounds like a meaningful process until you understand what aging means at industrial scale. It does not mean small batches in a controlled environment monitored for flavor development. It means mashed pepper pulp stored in large containers at a production facility until it reaches a point the manufacturer considers acceptable for bottling. The specific pepper source isn't disclosed. The region where the cayenne is grown isn't listed. The quality standard for what enters that mash isn't published anywhere a consumer can find it. What they will tell you is that the ingredient list reads aged cayenne peppers, vinegar, salt, and garlic. 4 ingredients. That's genuinely restrained for this category, and it deserves credit. The problem isn't the additive load. The problem is the sodium, the sourcing opacity, and the fact that the heat level in this bottle fluctuates noticeably from one batch to the next in ways that suggest the pepper quality isn't consistent enough to standardize without adding more salt to compensate. Louisiana brand costs under $2. It tastes like something that costs under $2, and it's been getting away with the sodium number for over a century because nobody reads the back of a bottle they've been buying since childhood. Number 6, Frank's Red Hot. Original Frank's Red Hot is the wing sauce that became a personality. If you've been to a Super Bowl party in the last 30 years, this bottle was on the table. It's in the hot sauce vocabulary the way ketchup is, which means most people stopped thinking about it the moment it became familiar. Here's what's worth thinking about. Frank's Red Hot Original contains sodium benzoate. Sodium benzoate is a preservative. It's used in acidic foods to prevent microbial growth and extend shelf life. On its own, the FDA classifies it as generally recognized as safe, which is a category that means it hasn't been proven dangerous at normal consumption levels, not that it's been proven safe across all populations and consumption patterns. Here's the interaction most people don't know about. When sodium benzoate combines with ascorbic acid, which appears on numerous Frank's label variants, the two compounds can react to form benzene. Benzene is a known human carcinogen. The amounts produced in this reaction are small, but the point isn't one serving. The point is that someone who shakes Frank's onto food multiple times a day, every day for years, is not being told this reaction is occurring inside the bottle they trust. The cayenne peppers in Frank's are sourced from multiple growing regions. The specific sourcing isn't disclosed. The heat in Frank's is mild by hot sauce standards, which is partly the pepper selection and partly because the formula is engineered for broad palatability rather than genuine capsaicin delivery. You're not tasting the heat of a well-grown cayenne. You're tasting a calibrated version of it designed to offend the fewest possible people while still qualifying as hot sauce. Frank's Red Hot is owned by McCormick, the same spice conglomerate that owns Thai Kitchen, which showed up in the coconut milk investigation for undisclosed sulfite residues. McCormick generates over $6 billion in annual revenue. Reformulating Frank's to remove sodium benzoate is not a financial constraint at that scale. It's a margin decision dressed up as tradition. The bottle says, "I put that on everything." The label doesn't mention what everything comes with. Number 5, Cholula hot sauce. The wooden cap, that's the whole game. Cholula built an entire brand identity on a small piece of wood sitting on top of a glass bottle. It implies something handcrafted, something Mexican in the real sense, not the fast food sense, something that came from somewhere with a kitchen and a grandmother and a recipe worth protecting. Cholula was acquired by McCormick in 2020 for approximately $800 million. The wooden cap stayed. The grandmother did not follow. Here's what the ingredient list on Cholula Original tells you. Water, peppers, vinegar, salt, spices, xanthan gum. Water is the first ingredient. Not peppers, not vinegar, water. In a hot sauce whose entire identity is built on the flavor of the pepper, the primary ingredient is water. The peppers in Cholula are a blend of pecan and arbol, which are legitimate Mexican chili varieties. They also happen to be among the least expensive chili varieties commercially available. That combination of cheap peppers diluted with water and stabilized with xanthan gum is what's sitting inside the bottle you're paying a premium for because of a wooden cap. Xanthan gum is a thickening and stabilizing agent produced through bacterial fermentation. It's technically a natural compound. It's also in this formula because the pepper to water ratio isn't substantial enough to produce the body a real hot sauce should have on its own. The gum is doing structural work the peppers were supposed to do. Take out the xanthan gum and what's left would pour like flavored water. For people with corn sensitivities, xanthan gum is worth knowing about. It's frequently derived from corn during industrial production, which doesn't always appear clearly on the label. McCormick doesn't disclose the specific source of their xanthan gum on the Cholula label. Cholula scores reasonably well in flavor tests when people don't know what they're tasting. That's not a compliment. It means the formula is engineered to produce an acceptable sensory experience, not an exceptional one. $800 million bought the cap. The cap bought your trust. The trust is doing considerably more work than the pepper. Number 4. Hui Fong Sriracha. Let's just acknowledge something up front. Defending Hui Fong Sriracha on the internet is a survival instinct for a certain generation of food lovers. The Rooster bottle is practically a cultural artifact. People have it tattooed on them. I'm not here to argue with a tattoo. I'm here to read the label. Hui Fong Sriracha contains potassium sorbate and sodium bisulfite as preservatives. Sodium bisulfite is a sulfite compound. The FDA requires sulfite disclosure on food labels specifically because sulfite sensitivity is widespread enough to constitute a public health concern. Reactions range from mild headache and nasal congestion to serious respiratory distress in people with asthma or documented sulfite sensitivity. Sulfite sensitivity becomes more common with age. By the time someone is in their 60s, the odds that a sulfite exposure produces a noticeable reaction are meaningfully higher than they were in their 30s. The Sriracha shortage of 2022 and 2023 revealed something the fan base didn't want to examine too closely. Hui Fong sources its jalapenos from a single contracted growing region in California. When that supply was disrupted, the company had no secondary sourcing strategy. The shortage wasn't a supply chain crisis. It was the exposure of a production model that had no redundancy built in because cost efficiency was the priority. That's not what a premium product looks like behind the scenes. Independent testing on Hui Fong Sriracha has flagged sugar content that sits meaningfully higher than the pepper and vinegar base would naturally produce. Added sugars in the formula, sugar in a hot sauce performs the same function it performs in a pasta sauce or a bread. It compensates for a base ingredient that isn't doing enough on its own. It rounds off what should be a sharp, complex, fermented heat and turns it into something smoother and more immediately palatable. More like a condiment engineered for mass appeal and less like a hot sauce with something real at its core. The Rooster is still on the bottle. The label still looks exactly like it did in 1980. Nothing on the outside has changed. The preservatives, the sulfites, and the sugar content haven't changed either. And for a product built around the idea that it's different from every corporate condiment on the shelf, looking exactly like it did 45 years ago while functioning exactly like a mass market industrial sauce is a specific kind of irony. Number 3. Tabasco Original Red Sauce. Tabasco has been aging pepper mash on Avery Island, Louisiana, since 1868. That's the story. The story is real. The barrels are real. The island is real. The McElhenney family has been telling it for over 150 years, with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing the story is compelling enough that most people never look past it. Here's what's in the bottle alongside the aged pepper mash. Tabasco Original Red Sauce has 3 ingredients listed. Distilled vinegar, red pepper, salt. 3 ingredients. That looks clean. The problem isn't the additive list. The problem is what those 3 ingredients actually mean in the context of how this product is manufactured at industrial scale. Tabasco produces tens of millions of bottles annually. The pepper mash aged on Avery Island is supplemented with pepper sourced from Central and South America, primarily from contracted farms in Colombia and Latin America. The specific growing standards of those farms aren't disclosed. The pepper quality that enters the supplemental mash isn't something the consumer can verify. The aging story applies to the original Louisiana-grown crop. What percentage of any given bottle reflects that aged Avery Island mash, and what percentage comes from internationally sourced supplements is not something McElhenney publishes. The heat level in Tabasco is also worth examining. At 2,500 to 5,000 Scoville heat units, Tabasco sits at the mild end of a category that spans into the millions. That's a legitimate product choice. There are people who want mild heat, and Tabasco serves them. But the brand's positioning as a classic, serious hot sauce with a heritage-driven flavor profile implies something more complex than what the formula actually delivers. What you're tasting is primarily vinegar, sharp, aggressive, front-loaded vinegar that arrives before the pepper and stays after it's gone. The pepper is there. It's just not doing most of the work. For anyone managing acid reflux or GERD, that vinegar-forward profile is worth knowing. Tabasco sits at a pH of around 3.7. Regular use can aggravate esophageal lining issues in people who are already managing reflux symptoms, which is a significant share of adults over 50. 158 years of brand equity, a genuine production story that deserves respect, and a formula that's been riding that story for decades while the vinegar quietly runs the show. Number 2, Tapatio. Tapatio is a family story. Jose Luis Saavedra started the company in California in 1971 with a recipe, a borrowed $5,000, and a dedication to producing a Mexican-style hot sauce that reflected something real rather than something designed for maximum shelf appeal. That origin is genuine. That intention was real. Here's what happens when a genuine intention meets industrial-scale distribution across 50 years. Tapatio's current formula contains sodium benzoate, the same preservative that showed up in Frank's Red Hot. Same concern, same compound, same reaction potential with ascorbic acid. Tapatio also contains Red 40, an artificial dye derived from petroleum. Red 40 is one of the most widely consumed synthetic food dyes in the United States. It's also one of the most studied. Research published in peer-reviewed journals has associated artificial food dyes, including Red 40, with behavioral effects in children, specifically hyperactivity and attention difficulties. The European Union requires a warning label on products containing Red 40 that reads, "may have an adverse effect on activity and attention in children." That warning does not appear on the Tapatio bottle sold in the United States. The FDA does not require it. The sodium numbers in Tapatio are significant, 110 milligrams per teaspoon. For context, that's not the highest on this list, but Tapatio is used in larger quantities than most hot sauces because the heat level is moderate and the flavor is mild enough to pour generously. The realistic serving for someone using Tapatio as a table condiment at a taqueria is closer to a tablespoon than a teaspoon. At tablespoon quantities, the sodium accumulates in ways that the teaspoon figure on the label obscures. The pepper sourcing in Tapatio isn't disclosed by region. The specific chili varieties aren't named on the label. The ingredient list reads water, red peppers, salt, spices, garlic, acetic acid, sodium benzoate, Red 40. 8 ingredients. 2 of those exist only because the pepper base wasn't strong enough to stand on its own without color enhancement and chemical preservation. The family started something worth honoring in 1971. The current formula doesn't honor it. Number 1, Valentina Extra Hot. Valentina costs about $1, sometimes less. It lives on every taqueria table in America, every street food cart, every kitchen counter in a household that takes Mexican cooking seriously. People don't buy Valentina, they inherit it. It was there before you had opinions about hot sauce, and it will probably be there after. I say this with genuine affection. Valentina is a cultural institution. It is also, by a measurable margin, the most chemically compromised product on this entire list. Start with the heat. Valentina Extra Hot is listed at 2,100 Scoville heat units. That is not actually extra hot. A standard jalapeno from a grocery store produces more capsaicin than Valentina's Extra Hot formula. The heat you're experiencing is coming primarily from acetic acid, the compound in vinegar, not from capsaicin delivered by a quality pepper. Acetic acid produces a burning sensation on the palate that registers as heat without involving capsaicin receptors at all. It's a sensory simulation of heat, not the real thing. The label says extra hot, the Scoville number says otherwise. Then there's sodium benzoate. Then Red 40, the petroleum-derived synthetic dye carrying the European warning that doesn't travel to American labels. Then the sodium load at 160 milligrams per teaspoon, the highest on this entire list in a product people use by the poor because the heat level is low enough to encourage volume. Here's the number that reframes the bottle completely. A tablespoon of Valentina, which is a conservative estimate of what actually goes onto a plate of food, delivers 480 milligrams of sodium. That's 21% of the recommended daily intake in one pour of a condiment that most nutritional tracking apps round down to 0, because the serving size on the label says teaspoon. The label math and the real world math are not the same math. The dollar price point is real. The cultural attachment is real. The chemistry is also real. And the dollar price point is partly explained by what got put in the bottle to hit it. Now here's what actually held up. 3 brands looked at the same category pressures, the same cost demands, the same shelf competition, and made completely different decisions. Those decisions show up on the ingredient list first. Here's what you should actually be reaching for. Best option, number 3, Yellowbird Habanero Sauce. Yellowbird launched out of Austin, Texas in 2013 and built something the rest of this list mostly abandoned, a formula where the pepper does all the actual work. The ingredient list reads habanero peppers, carrots, onion, citrus juice, garlic, apple cider vinegar, salt. That is the complete list. No xanthan gum stabilizing a thin pepper base. No sodium benzoate. No Red 40. Every ingredient in this bottle is something you could hold in your hand at a farmer's market. The heat is real and it comes from where it's supposed to come from. Habanero peppers range from 100,000 to 350,000 Scoville heat units. The capsaicin in this bottle isn't simulated by acetic acid. It arrives from the pepper, builds across the palate, and finishes with genuine warmth rather than a vinegar sting. The carrot and citrus add natural sweetness and body that most brands achieve with gum additives or added sugar. When your base ingredients are good enough, you don't need chemistry to compensate for them. Open a bottle and the aroma is unmistakably pepper forward. That sounds like a low bar. After going through the avoid list, it genuinely isn't. Best option. Number 2, El Yucateco X6 Extra Hot Habanero. El Yucateco comes from Merida in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico and has been making habanero-based sauces since 1968. This is a brand where the habanero isn't a marketing choice. It's the entire point. The Yucatan grows some of the most flavorful habanero peppers in the world, producing a pepper with a heat profile and a fruity complexity that doesn't need to be engineered around. The ingredient list reads habanero pepper, water, salt, acetic acid, xanthan gum, citric acid, and spices. Not a perfectly clean label. The xanthan gum is there, but here's what isn't. Sodium benzoate, Red 40, artificial color, or added sugar. For a product in this price range and heat tier, the absence of the worst offenders matters. The heat runs between 11,000 and 120,000 Scoville units depending on the season's harvest. That variability is a positive signal. It means the heat is coming from the pepper, and peppers vary by season. A hot sauce with perfectly consistent heat year over year is telling you something about its formula that real pepper-based products simply cannot deliver. Open a bottle, and you immediately understand that the pepper's in charge here. Not the vinegar, not the salt, the pepper. That's what the whole category is supposed to feel like. Best option. Number 1, Truff Original Black Truffle Hot Sauce. Yes, it costs around $20 a bottle. Keep reading before you close the tab. Truff launched in 2017 with a proposition that should have sounded ridiculous. A luxury hot sauce with black truffle. The skepticism was reasonable. The hot sauce category is built on value, accessibility, and the specific satisfaction of spending almost nothing on something that makes food significantly better. A $20 bottle should require justification. Here's the justification. The ingredient list on Truff Original reads ripe chili peppers, vinegar, sugar, sea salt, black truffle, red agave nectar, and chili extract. That's everything. No petroleum-derived dyes, no synthetic preservatives, no sodium benzoate, no red 40, no potassium sorbate, no xanthan gum stabilizing a weak base. The formula is built around real ingredients that each contribute something to the flavor profile rather than ingredients that exist to compensate for the ones that couldn't do their job. The sugar and red agave in this formula deserve a direct acknowledgement because added sweeteners showed up on the avoid list as a negative signal, and they deserve the same scrutiny here. The difference is function. In Valentina or Frank's, sugar rounds off a heat profile that would otherwise be too sharp or too thin to be palatable. In Truff, the agave is balancing a genuinely complex flavor profile that includes the earthiness of black truffle alongside capsaicin heat. It's seasoning a complete flavor picture, not compensating for a base ingredient that isn't showing up. The truffle is real. Third-party verification confirms black truffle extract in the formula at concentrations that register in the flavor, rather than appearing in trace amounts for label purposes only. Open a bottle and the aroma immediately distinguishes itself from everything else in this comparison. There's an earthiness underneath the pepper that doesn't come from chemistry. The heat builds cleanly without the acidic front load that defines the vinegar-heavy avoid list. The finish lingers with something that actually rewards your attention. The sodium is reasonable for a hot sauce. The ingredient list is short enough to read before your food gets cold. No recalls, no regulatory flags, no criminal proceedings connected to the ownership structure. Just a product that costs what it costs because it contains what it says it contains. $20 is real money for a bottle of hot sauce. That price is the non-GMO verified chili peppers, the real black truffle, and the decision not to fill the gap between a mediocre pepper and a great flavor with a color additive and a preservative compound that reacts with vitamin C. You're not paying for a label that implies quality. You're paying for a formula that delivers it. And if $20 genuinely isn't workable, go back to number 2 and buy El Yucateco. Both choices are the right ones for different reasons. The one rule, worth keeping. Stop buying hot sauce with more than 6 or 7 ingredients on the label. That single rule removes almost every brand from the avoid list from your cart without requiring you to memorize chemistry or carry a testing kit into the grocery aisle. In the store, flip the bottle. Read the ingredient panel, not the front label. The front label is a marketing document. The ingredient panel is the actual product. They are frequently telling very different stories. Here's what you're looking for. Named peppers with a variety specified, not just red peppers listed as a category. Real acid, vinegar or citrus juice listed clearly. Salt, garlic, maybe some aromatics. That's a hot sauce. That's all a hot sauce ever needed to be. Here's what you're putting back on the shelf. Sodium benzoate. Red 40 or any numbered artificial dye. Xanthan gum as the primary structural ingredient in a sauce whose structure should come from the pepper. Added sugar appearing before the salt. Natural flavor in a product whose entire purpose is to taste like peppers. Because that phrase means the peppers weren't producing enough and something else was added to fill the gap without disclosing what. The brands on the best list aren't doing anything technically difficult or financially impossible for large companies. They're sourcing real peppers, keeping the ingredient list honest, and not filling the space between a mediocre base and an acceptable product with chemistry. When the base ingredient is doing its job, the additive list becomes structurally unnecessary. That is the entire lesson of this aisle in one sentence. In the European Union, synthetic dyes like Red 40 require warning labels. Several preservative compounds common in American hot sauce formulas are restricted or prohibited in EU food products entirely. The bottles on American shelves contain things that wouldn't survive the European regulatory environment without reformulation. Most shoppers never find out about that gap because the front of the bottle keeps them occupied long enough to get through checkout. You reached for hot sauce because you wanted real heat from a real pepper, something that makes food better rather than something that quietly delivers a synthetic dye, a sodium load 3 times what the serving size implies, and a preservative reaction nobody told you was occurring in the bottle you trusted. The 3 brands that held up tell you exactly what's inside. The 7 on the avoid list are counting on the fact that you trust the label enough not to read it. Now you know how to read it. If this changed which bottle you're going to reach for next time, you're standing in that aisle. Passing it along to someone who shakes Valentina on everything is probably the most useful thing you can do with it. They deserve to know what's actually in the bottle they inherited.